Dr. P here to ask a question and perhaps suggest reasons why are there too many bits in tabletop games. And what do I mean by that? Well, I see games nowadays with lots of stuff sprawled all over a table. Cards and several different sides of cards, tokens, dashboards, cubes, etc. Lots of stuff. This offends my motto, which I'll talk about later, of keeping things simple. And I ask myself, how do people keep track of it all? Well, perhaps they don't, of course. It goes better with the notion that many people buy a game for the weight of the box than for the quality of the game. Now, computer games can have lots of virtual bits because the computer tracks them, but even there, the human has to cope with it all. People often confuse complexity with gameplay depth or intricacy. They are not the same things. Complexity for the sake of complexity makes no sense, except for puzzles, where additional complexity may make the puzzle harder to solve. And I've talked about this in other videos. Complexity sometimes appeals to the oh shiny types, especially if the bits are indeed shiny. But I say, aren't games supposed to be enjoyable to play, not merely impressive to look at? So, my design motto, a designer knows he has achieved perfection, not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. Another form, which is originally about Japanese gardening, your garden is not complete until there is nothing else that you can remove. And another form, from Albert Einstein, everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. Now, this brings in the question of how important are the choices in the game. Gameplay depth comes partly from the importance of choices that make a difference. Complexity can pose many, many choices along with the bits, but if those choices don't make much difference one way or another, depending on which you pick, then there's little gameplay depth. If they do make much difference and it's a complex game, then you're likely in for a long game, which is not what most gamers desire these days. And of course, we have pretty low standards today. The other day I heard someone say Love Letter is a strategy game, which is nonsense. I suppose they said that because it isn't purely a luck or party game. That is, you have to pay attention. But it is still, like Werewolf, mostly a guessing game. That's not strategy. Now, people who are designing puzzles or puzzles disguised as games, parallel competitions, sometimes called multiplayer solitaire, that's common these days, and they often add complexity to make the puzzle harder to solve. I think that's where most of the games with a zillion bits are coming from. And again, there's a little bit of the notion that people will pay more for a game with more bits. If the player is playing the system, that is the game, rather than playing the other players, complexity may add interest because the system becomes more complex and perhaps more interesting. The late James Matha asked a question about a game he was to publish. Quote, when is there too much? Is there ever too much stuff? Should we be concerned and attempt to design with less things going on and less bits used? If this wasn't my own game and I wasn't the publisher, I would certainly tell others to reduce and simplify, unquote. So, as a designer, you have to ask yourself, do you want gameplay depth or puzzle depth? Two very different things. So, I suggest in games, simplify, reduce the bits, and you'll make a better game. For puzzle games, often complexity and lots of bits works for the puzzle. Thanks for listening.